something happened over the last couple of weeks, which is really interesting. And there's a few different things we want to talk about this, but it's the federal government released its budget. And of course it has a little tie-in with the gun buyback, the assault style weapon buyback, whatever their descriptor is, and some other things too. So I thought we kicked that around a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. So I was keeping my eye on this because this budget spans over the next 2 years. And I was watching for that line item on the buyback confiscation program so I could see how far down the road they are on this, right? That's very important. As you know, they've already spent $47.2 million, I think it is, on the confiscation program, and not a single gun has been picked up. And I'm happy with that. That's fine. So the budget amount that they've allocated over the next 2 years is only $30.4 million over 2 years. So you're talking like $15 million a year, which, you know, if it was in your or I bank account, it would be pretty exciting. But on a federal budget item, it's literally nothing. In fact, I don't think it's enough to even keep up the overhead they have on the administrative end of this. So the good news is, when I look at that, what that tells me is they have not allocated any money to actually go and start confiscating firearms, which means it's not likely to happen, at least for the next 2 years. And of course, by then we'll be into an election cycle and they may not be here anyways. So, you know, it's the budget was bad news for all Canadians, but in a way it was sort of good news for gun owners.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's a lot going on there. Obviously, they're not budgeting for the buyback. I mean, was it the Fraser Institute or someone? One of these think tanks had said that this program could cost up to $7 billion to roll out. If it was rolled out, you know, and consistent with the vision that the Trudeau Liberals had 2 weeks after the spree shooting in Nova Scotia, when they thought they would capitalize on this dark day in Canadian history. So if it's consistent with that vision, it's like $7 billion.
Yeah, well, when they first introduced the ban back in May of 2020, former Public Safety Minister Bill Blair said it would cost between $300 and $400 million. But he said there was only about 150,000 rifles affected, which we know is clearly untrue. The PBO came back and said it will be upwards of 800 million, or just under 800 million. And the Fraser Institute accounted for the cost of actually, you know, compensating people. And it would be somewhere between 2.6 billion all the way up to 6.7 billion. And that there was about 518,000 rifles affected. So, you know, I kind of have this theory that why Bill sort of lowballed those numbers. You know, 150,000 rifles. We know there's 90,000 AR-15s alone, which were previously restricted, and therefore they were registered. So they know who's got them. Are they trying to say that all the other models and variants they banned would only account for about 60,000 guns total? We know that's untrue. And I think the idea was they were going to lowball those numbers. So when, you know, compliance was low, you know, if they got 150,000 guns out of this, they could say, oh, we've had great success. I don't know. But the numbers are all over the place. You've got Bill Blair as low as 300 million and the Fraser Institute as high as 6.7 billion. Who knows what the truth would be, but I don't actually see this ever happening. So,
well, when it comes to the federal government, we know it'll be somewhere around $5 to $7 billion just because that's how they operate. Look at the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Yeah.
Right? You know, it was supposed to cost the taxpayer $0, and now it's like something like $32 billion, or I don't know, something like that, right? Something crazy. And
it'll be worse than the long gun registry for sure.
Yeah, well, of course. And things are a lot more expensive than they were back in the long gun registry days. And you know, and I think when Bill Blair came out with that number, he didn't want to make it look like it was going to cost a lot, so Canadians weren't going to balk at the cost, right? But here's the thing. He was probably just thinking, well, 150,000 rifles divided by whatever, divide that into $300 million. There you go. It's like, well, I don't think he even considered the administrative costs. And the other thing that's really important to remember, and the reason why, even if there's really low compliance, even if they only take in, you know, 180,000 rifles, let's say, the administrative cost is the same whether they take in 2 rifles, but they make this available across the country and all the infrastructure required, or they take in 250,000 rifles.
Right.
Like the administrative cost is what's going to bury Canadians in the mountain of debt that they're already buried in. So it's pretty wild. I mean, you know, the Liberals, they capitalized on the opportunity. They didn't care about what can actually be done, how much it's actually going to cost, any impact on safety. Because if you remember, the guy that committed that spree shooting was not a licensed gun owner, and he didn't source any of the guns that were used in that shooting within Canada. He illegally smuggled them all from the United States, which the buyback would not even touch in the remotest, right? So it's, again, right? Like this whole plan doesn't stand up to any scrutiny whatsoever, but whatever, man. That's the Trudeau Liberals. It's a very unique group of people in the entire history of our country. So
that's an interesting way to put it. A unique group of people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's not your father's or your grandfather's Liberal Party. It's not your parents' Liberal Party. This is a completely different group of people, and they are not liberal at all. So anyway, I think we did quite a few interviews. If you total them up, you know, through this whole budget process, we probably did, I don't know, 5 or 6 between the two of us.
Yeah, I did one today, actually. And it was interesting because you can tell that sometimes with media, and I mean, like, look, not everybody's a subject matter expert on this, but he said, you know, this is what the government's willing to spend to get these guns off the street, you know, and it's none of these are not on the street. They're in the safes and gun rooms of licensed gun owners where they've been safely and without issue for decades. So if we were spending hundreds of $millions to get illegally smuggled guns in the hands of violent repeat offenders off the street, I probably wouldn't say a word about it, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the case. So, yeah, it's interesting that the messaging out of the Liberals still does permeate and sink in different places. But, yeah, just keep hammering away at it.
Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.